So with the Clematis, what I'm going to try and do in this area, lower left, is create a blurred impression of nearer foliage. So I've been working on the lower part of the image where there's a bit more contrast or difference between light and dark with the leaves behind, compared to the top area which is further away and has less difference between light and dark. So on the bottom left corner here, I would damp this to try and create an impression of the little bit of trellis and then some of the leaf, and damp it, I suppose, in stages. The trellis part has a grey aspect, grey colour, violet and cabin yellow mixed together. I'm using the similar colours throughout the limited palette rather. So that's a violet grey mix on a damp ground. Obviously there is leaf in front of this. Just try and catch that edge. So the aim here would be to try and make this soft and blurred, which is different from the Clematis flowers. And there's something there and something there. Not sure what that is. Ah, it's this upright. And a little bit there. So on a damp surface is a little more controllable with the spread of colour. So that leaf has a sort of yellow-green. So these leaves are represented, yes, but not in a lot of detail. Put it on a damp colour. Make the leaf colour different each time. Or one compared to another. This is a darker area. Old leaf perhaps. Little bits of other leaf. A little more contrast right in front, still thinking of soft edges for the most part. So that has less, the dark colour has less water in it. These are out of focus, kind of lost areas of leaf. although there is more happening there, I'm just going to give it a general description. Not get too involved in the detail. So I'm trying to describe the gaps around leaves and leave these leaf shapes in front with a hard edge. So in theory they then come forwards. Bit of blurring there. And right up against the flower. So this makes quite an intricate area, this immediate foreground, and I might just leave it partly finished. Blur that edge a bit. Blur that partly. So a little variety in the greens, impression of different leaves. enough there. Elsewhere in the image I have lifted out for a suggestion of stem. There are some further areas where a petal overlaps, for example, where you could put a little violet colour wet on wet behind, and perhaps add a bit more to the centre of the flower. So this petal is in front of this flower, which is in shadow. So to try and give that slightly more 3D effect, I've mixed up a little violet from Permanent Rose and Ultramarine, put it along that edge. Take a soft natural fibre brush, a little bit of water, and just dab, so to remove that sharp edge against the on the other side, against the shadow side of the flower. So this edge is sharp against the flower that's in front, and the shadow is slightly softer. Should help to push that petal forwards. This is a reduction or a simplification of something in the flower that's really a lot more complicated. But that's the nature of painting sometimes, especially watercolour. It is a reduction or a simplification of nature. So this flower is in front of this one, and I'd like to try and put a little bit of shadow on the flower behind. It's tricky because that's against the stamen. A bit of water. There is a gap between the petals just here. A glimpse of green. And a further area of shadow cast underneath here. Blur that edge. Damp brush, lose the sharpness of these edges. That shadow is cast further along here. It's a little bit paler or softer. Trying to lose that edge. Another gap with a dark green. So I'm on the lookout for those gaps which help to explain the petals disposition. This petal is in shadow. It's a bit it's important not to make these shadows too heavy, because it is, after all, just a flower and not something that has much weight. So hopefully that flower is beginning to come forwards of the one behind it. Something there, shadow edge. Yeah. So that flower's just standing out a little bit more than it did, and this one has shadow underneath it, light from above, so anything that's below is more in shade. This one has a bluey coloured shadow. Like that. And this is in shadow. So I can only really do that once. Let that blur. It's already got colour on it, that surface. So the stamen have got shadow underneath them. Also, something like this, which casts a blurred shadow on the centre of the flower. So there's a little bit of shadow. Each one of those has got a little more shadow underneath. But don't want to do too much of that because it'll make the whole thing look rather heavy. The flower centres, I would just give an impression of pale yellow, perhaps. So the centre of this one, just going to give it a mix of cadmium yellow and lemon yellow. In the centre there. And then just with a clean damp brush, just soften that a little bit. And leave the centre, the core of where the stamens are, a sort of pale yellow. So pale yellow there. And a little bit there. It depends on the development of the flower, how old it is, I suppose, the timing of it. The stamens are more centred, clustered on that flower. They're much more open on this flower. See them spreading out. And on these other flowers, they're again a bit more tightly clustered. So I'm just going to leave that as an impression. But put the colour, the richer colour, lower down and leave the top part of the stamen white. Yeah, so that's just a little hint of yellow in there. Let's come right out of this now. I'm hoping it's an impression of these flowers with some areas that are a bit out of focus and some areas that are in focus. I've simplified rather than using botanical detail. There is perhaps a little bit of a glaze, yellowy-green glaze could go over that seed head. And where the seed head overlaps the flower, maybe lift out. There's an unopened flower which has a sort of blue-violet, pale blue-violet colour. Just here there's an unopened one. So a little hint of green on one side, probably reflected light. A little bit of lifting out there. That's it for the Clematis impression.